Good morning, I am Kevin Price. Delighted to be with you. Going to spend some time talking to you about you and your business. I tell you, it's your business to be careful about your health, taking care of your health, taking care of the loved ones and family you have. And that's one of the reasons why we at the Price of Business Show partnered with CAOOY.org and Frank Granett to really help people understand the problem of ADHD and really the problem of the way it's often treated. And our segments are called the Price of ADHD Business. I love that. That's something that Frank Granett came up with. He's with a group called CAOOY.org. Frank, tell the audience about the feature we do, and then about CAOOY, and then our guest today, which looks like a great one.
Yeah, great to be on again, Kevin, with you. And CAOOY is Coalition Against Over-Medicating Our Youth. And Kevin, since you and I began this campaign many months ago, we went after risk factors. We brought on prominent healthcare providers and workers across the country to kind of get after this risk factor analysis. And when you look at the risk factors, and that's what we do, we're a public education charity. We go after the risk factors to premature drug therapy, especially in our young child population. And today's guest is no different. He's a renowned national expert on fluoride. And today, Kevin, we're going to talk about the fluoride link to ADHD, and more specifically fluoride in our drinking water. He is a retired St. Lawrence University professor of chemistry in New York, and his passion has led to developing and co-founding a nonprofit, and it's the Fluoride Action Network. And please welcome Dr. Paul Connett. Sir, great to have you on board with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Dr. Connett, we are delighted to have you on the program. I got to tell you, there's always been long terms now, probably for decades, conspiracy theories around fluoride. And so when people hear negative commentary about fluoride, they probably often chagrin. It's like, oh, really, we're doing that again? But you've really have raised some serious points that people need to be aware of, and it's certainly different from what some of the arguments against fluoride we've heard over the years. Talk a little bit about, first of all, your organization, but go ahead and get to the meat of the conversation as well about your concerns about fluoride.
Well, indeed, it was when I got involved 19 years ago, I didn't want the issue. I had fallen victim of what many people in the United States have fallen victim to, the notion that the people opposed to fluoridation were a little crazy. The Flat Earth Society, Dr. Strangelove. But this has been a device to keep people away, keep people like me, scientists. After all, I was a professor of chemistry. My specialty was environmental chemistry and toxicology. And I'd been kept away from this issue. I didn't want to be labeled Looney Tunes. But when my wife finally persuaded me to look at the literature, I was astonished. And I was actually rather embarrassed to have gone along with the crowd, as it were, thinking that the people against fluoridation were nutty. Anyway, the science is firmly on our side. The science is firmly now that swallowing fluoride does very little to fight tooth decay. That's why they put it in the water, of course. And the science that says that it's dangerous is growing stronger every day. The most disturbing information, which has been growing since 1995, is that fluoride is neurotoxic. It can enter the brain and change behavior. And there have now been no less than 43 studies that indicate an association between children being exposed to fluoride and lowered IQ. And this is totally consistent with the animal literature. There have been 30 animal experiments which shows that fluoride interferes with an animal's ability to learn and remember when they're put in mazes. So there's a large body of literature, both animal and human, which indicates that fluoride is neurotoxic.
Wow. Let me ask Frank a question about this, because Frank is kind of my go-to guy when it comes to this type of things. How familiar were you with this before Stephen, my producer, emailed it to you?
Yeah, Kevin, the article that's going to, in Dr. Connett, we're going to have an article on usdailyreview.com, so listeners be aware of that website. I was very familiar. I knew fluoride was a neurotoxin, but what significance it had. And once our producers from Price of Business contacted me regarding Dr. Connett, and I did more research on it, it's profound. It is a neurotoxin. It acts as a calcifying agent. Is that correct, doctor? Like a calcifying agent in the brain. Specifically, the pineal gland is very much affected by fluoride, but there's a whole host of other effects. Imagine a pregnant woman, for example, drinking a lot of fluoridated water, and that water, fluoride, crosses that placental barrier.
Yes.
And especially when the neurofetal protein development occurs, could that be an onset of triggering these type of behaviors?
Well,
what your opinion
one
on
of the
that?
mechanisms. The trouble with fluoride is, whilst from a chemical perspective it's fairly benign. I mean, if you put a jar of sodium fluoride on a shelf, it'll hang around for years without doing anything, without reacting with anything. But it's extremely biologically active. And one of the things it does is attracted to positive ions, metal ions, like calcium. Yes, and that's why it's supposed to strengthen the teeth. It replaces the hydroxide ion in calcium hydroxyapatite, which is the mineral that makes up the teeth and the bones. So it concentrates in the bones, and it will go anywhere, any tissue that calcifies. And one of those tissues that you've mentioned is the pineal gland. This is a calcifying tissue. And there was an astonishing experiment done by Jennifer Luke, in fact, her PhD thesis, where she looked at the pineal glands of about 20 cadavers in England and found an amazing concentration of fluoride in these calcium hydroxyapatite deposits in the pineal gland. Went up to 9,000 parts. The average was 9,000 parts per million fluoride in these crystals. And then in the animal studies that she subsequently did, she showed that it lowered melatonin levels. Which
Dr. Connett, I'm sorry, we have to wrap up with about a minute left. That was phenomenal, and we're on a very tight schedule through this month. But I think, Frank, we need to try to get the doctor back on in April to go longer, to do maybe 2 segments with Dr. Connett, if he'd be open to it, because this is phenomenal information.
You know what, Kevin? Doctor, what I'd like to do is let our listeners know your website is fluoridealert.org. That's fluoride, Fluoride, alert.org. And I'd like our listeners to go to your website, Doctor, and take a look at that DVD. And it's got, we're not talking about, minor scientists here across the country. We have a Nobel Peace Prize winner that's on this DVD. It's explaining the toxicity of fluoride and how it reacts, and especially in our young child population. So until you come back on, sir, I'd like to have our listeners go there, go to usdailyreview.com, and we'll have another article talking about that, Kevin.
Yeah, real quick, what is a safe alternative to fluoride for preventing cavities? Real quick.
Eat less sugar, fruit and vegetables, and brush your teeth. The biggest contribution to fighting tooth decay in the 20th century was the toothbrush, not fluoridation.
So what do you put on your toothbrush?
Any toothpaste.
But they all have fluoride. Just
but not with fluoride, if possible.
There's fluoride.
Like xylitol, maybe?
Baking soda types.
Yeah, baking soda, xylitol. It's the brushing that's important. Getting the stuff out of between the teeth.
Thanks so much, very, very much. Also, Frank can be found at CAOOY.org. Great segment. Wish we had more time. We're going to get more time in the future. All right, when we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here shows up over there at usdailyreview.com. And this is The Price of Business.